Are you one of the many busy professionals working in offices day in and day out? Do you wonder how some people grow their wealth fast, retire early, and play on workdays? Well, you're in luck, because Ginny Bolling hosts this show, Pivot to Prosperity, where she interviews people that can do just that. Play on workdays. Many guests have become financially free. She also interviews people that are on their journey and people that are in support roles, like attorneys, contractors, brokers, and others. Commercial real estate is the common element. She is on a mission to be sure busy professionals know they can own substantial commercial properties too, like apartments, self-storage facilities, and others, and not have to do the work managing them. Passive investing is the key. Syndications are the typical method. Tax write-offs are some of the biggest rewards. Ginny and partners find the deals, build a strong team and business plan, then offer the investment opportunities to passive investors. New episodes are released every Tuesday at 12, so watch for new releases. If you want to get involved, let us know. You need to get pre-qualified to hear about most deals. See the show notes for contact information.
Hello, hello. This is Ginny Bolling, and today I have with me Ginger Simoens, and we know each other through CRRP, which is Commercial Real Estate Women, and we both live in North Orlando, and we've been talking about doing this for a while, so I'm so glad to have you on, Ginger. Thank you for coming.
Terrific, Jenny. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to participate.
Well, and you have been doing some very exciting things. You have been in commercial development for decades, and we've just been talking before we started recording about all the neat stuff you're doing and where your passion is. And I would like you to tell the audience what it is you do.
Certainly. Thank you. So I started my own business consulting about a year and a half ago, and I help developers of different types with their centers. So it could be a ground lease for a freestanding restaurant, or it could be a lifestyle center. I have currently both of those going on. Also, there could be something in between where I'm helping do some renovations so that somebody can take over a space and open up for business. So it's really varied, but it's all centered around commercial real estate, typically in the restaurant and retail industry, part of the industry.
So after construction, so there's some pre-leasing and all that going on. Do you get into the pre-leasing as well?
I don't meet with tenants for the purpose of deal making, but I definitely help with the leasing folks as far as what the construction obligations are. Like, you help them negotiate what it is that somebody's going to pay for and what the tenant improvement allowance should be, what the cost should be. You definitely have to do some budgeting.
We'll come back to that because that's a whole thing unto itself, really, right?
Right.
But so after you do, say, new construction and it gets filled, do you stay in touch with the owners? Do they call you back to do things after that usually?
Sometimes, occasionally when you build, say you've got a 15-acre center and you've built some retail space in the back, or whatever, it could even be the center point. It could be street front. You may have some pads that hadn't been leased during original construction, and so you have to go back and as you get a new tenant in, you'll come back and work on that pad, or maybe they've decided they want to go ahead and make another phase. And so you'll get involved in the next step of the project.
That's fun. I'm sure when you see it all full, that's pretty rewarding too. I know how that is with road building, especially. Oh, it's done finally. Yeah. So, um,
And then they
but
don't know you anymore all of a sudden.
say that again. What?
And then they don't know you anymore. We were kind of joking a little bit, talking before. I get through the process of, I'm involved in the projects before they come out of the ground. So this is, it's kind of not secret, but it's not known to the community that something is coming. And then they start to see the construction and they get excited and they know something is coming. And then as you see who they are, who the tenants are that are coming in, then all of a sudden there starts to become people start to get hired. And so that starts to turn into the operational side of things. And so we've delivered the baby And now the baby's going to grow and have a life of its own. And so it doesn't know the obstetrician anymore. That's kind of how that works.
Ah, it
You
makes
birth
sense.
it,
It does.
and then, you're done. You're not the parent. You're just help feed it there, and you deliver it, and then people make a life out of it, and business is rolling, and people are working, and income is happening for for everybody, the landlord, the tenants, the people that work there, and the community has something.
So talk more about the types of properties and kind of do a picture for us here.
Sure. You can have, but in my business, what I typically have is two different types. I have either a center, it could be a small center or a larger center where there are multiple tenants coming in. There are buildings that hold multiple tenants and a mix of restaurants or other type of freestanding buildings. And then my other part, or my typical client, that is a ground lease developer, is going to have a single tenant on a single piece of property. So that's the kind of variance that I usually deal with. The centers, when there are multiple tenants to them, rarely is it a strip of pads, but I have had that before. But typically, it is something where you've got a couple of anchors, at least one anchor. Sometimes it's a grocery store, if it's a neighborhood center, or it could be a large retailer. And so the anchor is that big tenant that draws the other tenants around. And so a lot of the TJX brands, Home Sense, Home Goods Marshalls, they're an anchor. The anchors of the past would have been like a JC Penney's or a movie theater, something that's big, that's got a lot of draw to it. And then the rest of the center kind of develops around that. And then, of course, like I said, you've got the pad tenants that are usually street side. Those are typically something that kind of fronts the project, and the inline tenant sits behind, or the inline tenants, and then you just have circulation through the center. And that's, large parking fields kind of in the middle of all that.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that because, as you know, some of the urban planning is to try to hide the parking, right? Orange County is trying to do some of that in some areas, and it's location specific a lot of times. But
Mhm.
what do you think? Have you done that before with other projects, or do you have a strong opinion one way or another?
Um, it seems like it's occasionally the developer opinion of that is that the developers are trying to get the best income and the best return. The tenants drive a lot of that feeling of what they want to have when they their shoppers enter a project and have a good place to park and a convenient place to park, and then can shop and get large quantities of stuff from their store and go out to a car and have somewhere shady. And we'll walk a million miles at a mall, but we want to park as close as we can to the door. That's just our nature, right? um, so and this has been part of development struggles, since I began almost 30 years ago. um, there is an ideal of a walkability and having the presence at the street, and to get that community feel, and not just look out at large parking areas. um, that becomes really difficult because you have a retailer or a restaurant that's up against the sidewalk, that's up against the street, and you don't have circulation around the building. And so all of a sudden, all of the services that you need to be able to support that business have to be performed from 50% of the building frontage, because you're sitting on a corner and you've got 50% of the building is pretty for view. You don't have the place where deliveries are made. It's the same face of the building where tenants are, or the customers are entering, and they want to put their best face forward, but that's where they're bringing deliveries. So that is always the constant struggle
Yeah.
of when you're trying to develop to where it looks street friendly, and attractive, and you're trying to pull people into the middle, but you have to have the practicality of trash has to be taken out and stored, and food has to be brought in, or goods have to be brought in and delivered, and boxes need to be taken out. What do? You
Yeah.
can't live in an invisible box.
Yeah.
So those are harder to do for sure. I
Right.
think that most of the jurisdictions these days have really strong requirements for landscaping and wide walkways that bring you through the parking lot. So I think that the days of the old Kmart parking lot where it was pavement the whole way and some great big parking lot lights, we just don't have that anymore. Those are days of the past. Now we have a lot of green, we have a lot of trees, landscape areas, and like I said, those pathways that really invite people to walk through a project.
I think of ideas at the weirdest time.
That's okay.
It seems like the parking lots, when they're empty at night, should become something else for the community at night.
Mm.
Do you do that ever?
When you have community events in a parking lot, um, there
Oh,
are
those
a
curb stops. Ooh.
well, they're right, you don't do those. We don't like those at all anymore. Those are only where you really have to have them. Um, but when you do take a part of a center and you create a community fair environment or somewhere where you can have events, that really engages with the retailers. I mean, you want full engagement there. You want the restaurants and the retail and the entertainment to all activate together. So you wouldn't often, I can't think of a circumstance where you would have the community involved at the center without the
The
need to
reason.
have the center
Yeah,
open.
yeah, yeah. That makes sense, yeah.
Yeah,
There can be
where
fun.
um you do have certain things like the Christmas tree sales where you see a tent that's using, the outside of a center, fireworks or, some other fundraiser or something like that. But
Right, right.
that,
Yeah.
those are those are kind of frowned upon sometimes by the national retailers. They don't want you to use any part of the parking lot except to drive sales.
So, how is the retail market these days? We've heard things over the last few years. What do you see?
I see some unbelievable optimism. So there was the typical every 4 years, you have a little bit of a slowdown during election time. People are less committed to signing deals in second and third quarter of the election year. After the election, you get a little bit of movement, but then the next triggering event for the East Coasters is ICSC in New York, and that's December. It's usually the first week of December. So you see some deals starting to come back then. So we had that little bit of a slowdown last year. And then the optimism and challenges have not slowed things down. I really expected to see a lot more resistance in getting leases signed with the tariffs, and I'm not seeing that. We've the projects that I'm involved with have seen leases signed for national retailers that heavily rely on imported goods, and they're still doing the deals. So I think that there is definitely the vision of long-term investment and that this is a short-term issue. And so they're looking at the big picture. They're looking at the long-term value.
Well, I know locally here, we're both in Orlando. I know people that are doing tenant representation and helping tenants find space, and they are really busy. So, it seems
Yes,
like it's a healthy market. Yeah. Yeah.
I agree. I
That's
agree.
good. Do you get involved in any kind of brownfields type of dirt where, there's some cleanup that has to be done first?
I have, and it is really difficult. Um, uh, it's ironic. I was just explaining this to somebody this morning that we were doing a phase one environmental inspection on a new piece of property that we're in due diligence phase in right now along the Gulf Coast. And luckily, I'm not expecting a phase two because it's it's part of a large DRI and development of regional impact. So that's how you were able to put together large properties or large communities of commercial property in the past. Um, and so I'm not worried because I know what was there before. It was an office building. It was a medical office building, and so the building is down, but the parking lot was new then, and we'll be repairing or taking out part of that to build another building. So the ground has been protected or treated well. I'm not expecting any problems there. And I was explaining to this person that, she asked what would trigger a phase two. And I said, well, for instance, when we're taking over property, I was working on a project in the Panhandle when I was with my previous employer, and we had a phase two environmental that we were concerned about because it had been a tractor repair place, from way back in the day. And so there were some contaminations. There were a couple of test fields, but there had to be a whole program in place for that to make sure that it was monitored and the commitment was there to take care of any contaminations. And I was explaining that, there are some tenants who are not going to want that kind of risk. And so that's a turn off for them right away if there's phase two or there's brownfield. But on the other hand, there have been some fantastic developments. There was an airport that was turned into a wonderful, really successful center in Colorado. And that's a prime example of building on brownfield where, somebody has gone in and done the work to reclaim that land, and there are commitments in place, and they made it something that's a thriving part of the community instead of leaving it or just monitoring. It was actually removed and treated, and it, it was a good use of the land.
Well, so yeah, I totally get that. In doing work for the Department of Transportation, we would have to make sure that soil and groundwater were clean enough for the workmen to be there. So they definitely had to do some remediation, and it's not easy, I know. So it's fun though to look at what is a brownfield now. I wouldn't be afraid of getting involved in one of those, but I don't seek them out at this point. I might in the future. But yeah, I know some companies that are really good at doing, their part. So anyway, yeah, so it's interesting. And so another thing I thought that would be really good to have you talk about is how you see the different retail users out there. Is it changing? I mean, there's some talk about, especially because Amazon's been affecting so many different places. So who is it out there getting retail space?
So I think that you're going to see a continuation of TJX brands. They changed so much in the way that we shop. They're always really strong because they have taken over the place of the department store. Years ago, we used to go to J.C. Penney's, Macy's, the typical department store that we grew up with. And now you've seen like the collapse of things that didn't change. Pier 1, you could go 10 years later and see the same things in Pier 1. They're gone. Retailers that did not adapt and change. Steinmart, unfortunately, same thing. They were almost a department store, because you could get home goods and that sort of thing. Bells here in Florida. Those have really suffered. People like change. And the way that you drive more frequent trips, I mean, if you're going to go to Home Goods, you're not going to see the exact same thing there every time. So if you really like something, you probably better buy it that week or you will have trouble finding it again. And you can't exactly find it online. So I think that has changed a lot with online shopping. and the experience of going. And so the retailers who are able to turn over things very quickly and bring a variety, but you always know that you can get that type of thing there. You know, the shirts and the some of the materials that they use. Some of those things are made just for the TJX companies. Burlington, we saw a few years ago go from 50,000 square foot stores to 25,000 square foot stores. Significant change. They had to renegotiate to with the landlords to give up space and to get money. They're looking for some input on these long-term leases to reduce the size of their space and to give back space that the landlord now has to lease out to somebody else. And so you've seen the faces change on the centers. And a lot of times during those kind of changes, the landlord uses that opportunity to renovate the center. And we've seen that several times. I think that there has been a significant change even in the types of things that are available. We saw cons furniture come into the market in the last few years and disappear. And they were more based on buying a package and then financing. So they were really about the financing. And I think people have gotten smarter about that kind of thing and understand that they're being taken. I don't know that Cons was taking advantage of anybody, but that type of financing may not be the healthiest for you.
Right.
Our good economy probably didn't help that type of user, but they were huge. They took over backfill of large open spaces. So I think we're seeing, about 20 years ago, we started to see retailers carry less stock and they were able to review and revise the way that they were getting materials into their stores. Now you see very small back rooms. You've got Pop Shelf and Five Below that are kind of that fun place of even more reduced. Another one is no, gosh, the name just is Ollie's Bargain Basement, where you can go in and find different things, every time you shop. So those are very discounted retailers, but again, they kind of drive the dollar stores. Now you see a lot of um, YouTubers that show you how to take dollar store items and bring them into a more middle class home and to use them to do dupes of more expensive items.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of those retailers have changed. We saw Z Gallery go away after, around the time of Pier 1, Coldwater Creek went away. So some of those typical retailers like Chico's really kind of they continue to be a reliable place, and there have been a couple others that have emerged. The generations have changed.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, I will borrow a friend's term of the silver tsunami, and I'm sure that's out there a lot of different places. I'm not sure who coined that. That has a significant impact on new retail centers. You are either going to cater to that market for the next 10 or 15 years, or you are catering to a younger market, and that younger market is a lot more specific about the things that are relative to them that they can relate to are the antithesis of what we all grew up with. And the older generations, the older Gen X, the baby boomers, where we had those brands that we knew and we relied on. Younger generations like things that are more crafted and that feel more specific. And credibility to them has a lot more to do with that craftsmanship or something that feels more unique. And so that has a huge impact on everything about our shopping, who's going into the retail space, who we're building for, the size of what they're building for, and how long they're going to be there.
So talk about that, because we talked a lot about that before recording, so the audience didn't get to hear it. So talk about how you take people through that transformation as they come on property.
So when you're giving an experience to someone, when you're building a place of say an entertainment area, you talked about that earlier, to bring the community into the center. So when you've got more of a lifestyle center and you're wanting people to come to that area of their community and spend some time there and shop in multiple places. So maybe you have a Whole Foods or a Sprouts or a Trader Joe's where you're going to pretty frequently, but then you're also going back on the weekend because you're meeting a friend or a family to have some dinner together. But you're also able to walk through and experience, that we talked about hardscape and landscape and lighting and music come together to create maybe a plaza type of experience where sometimes there could be a fall craft show, there could be some vendors that come out, or maybe there's a couple of bands playing. And people are able to use multiple experiences and park one time and come in and have that event. And, those of us in Orlando area really are used to that kind of thing because if you go to Disney Springs or Universal City Walk, you're experiencing something where you can just walk through, but you've parked somewhere else and you're just kind of experiencing um, so the lifestyle center is almost kind of a blend of that, where you get a little bit of maybe your more neighborhood center where you come frequently and you're picking up your groceries or your specialty items or your take home chicken, or your pre-made meals and that type of thing. But you're also coming back and spending some time. So those experiences have got to be considered with the age of the people in the community. You have to really look at your demographics to understand who is going to be there and who is going to be shopping those places. And, Florida definitely has very predictable areas that retirees or near retirement or even that flip flop kind of retirement experience is craved. And so you have to create the space that is convenient for people. And that means that they're not going to walk a very long distance. No, it's very difficult to say if you are going to be doing your Christmas shopping and you like City Walk or you like Disney Springs and you want to go get some unique things there, you're committed to walking a ways. You have a very nice parking deck, but you're committed to walking for a little ways. Whereas, you may use the center that you're used to going to that has got a lot of things in one place, and you can maybe move from your car from one end to the other if you had to. But that's changing so many people year after year. The numbers of people who are buying those big shopping days online and having it delivered. So we have to keep up that pace when we're considering how to lay out a center and who we're going to put in there.
Wait, say that again. There's more or less people doing the big shopping days online.
More people are doing the shopping days
Yeah, okay.
online
Yeah.
and they spread it out over a longer period of time. The days of Black Friday are, where that was the day to get, or maybe the weekend to get those bigger sales. We all know you hit those sales, they're coming the first right after Halloween. You're
Right.
starting to get the pre-Black, and they call them Black Friday sales, but they're not. They're all month. And then they stretch into December. And so it's a lot easier to make sure that you get what you're wanting to get and have it delivered to the house. But look at Best Buy. Here's another unexpected change. When online purchases started to really hurt Best Buy, people were going to Best Buy to check things out and then ordering them online. So it became the showroom. And somebody would go in. I did the same thing. I wanted to go in and see what it was, but then I was going to shop online because I was starting to learn that I could get things really cheap online if I really did some digging to it. Now we see a lot of shopping can be, the research is done online. People do the comparisons online and they decide where they're going to buy it in person by what they researched online. So it does these odd cycles. And, these are cycles that aren't repeating cycles because we're developing them. We didn't have internet before, we didn't have internet shopping. So it is the experience drives what the next cycle is going to be.
Yeah, makes
And
sense.
people
Makes
still
sense.
wanted to go somewhere and touch it, or I needed it now.
Yeah, yeah.
So Best Buy has definitely benefited from that.
So one more big topic before we'll wrap it up. So, I've been involved with urban land planning for decades and whatnot too, and heard this and that, but I'm nowhere near what you do. And I thought that as more and more cars were becoming either autonomous or with more and more drivers, there would be less and less requirement from the cities and counties for parking spaces. And I had heard at one point that they were reducing that, but
Mhm.
I'm not so sure now. And then I think of all of us, the Silver Tsunami. Are they bumping the number of handicap places? Because there's a lot of us that are going to be
Mhm. It's so
hobbling around.
it is so true. And
What's going on?
definitely it affects uh, going back to the type of demographics that you're planning for in Florida, not to create super deep parking fields, right? Because people don't want to walk a long way. Even though you walk through Sam's Club and Costco 100 times looking for something, but not outside.
Yeah.
I mean, first of all, it's hot. And by the time that you're in the parking lot, if you're on the way out, there's a lot to deal with, right? Um, but um, the cars, I remember going to a center build. Gosh, I'm trying to think of what year it was. It was probably only 6 or 7 years ago, pre-COVID. And one of the big discussions there was exactly reducing the footprint of our parking fields because we were sure that autonomous cars were going to be an immediate future and that more people were going to be biking and coming in. Electric bikes were kind of starting. And we were sure that that's where the wave was going pre COVID. And so, yes, it was on everybody's radar to start turning malls, kind of deconstructing them, putting more green space in, more of that community plaza space, but also being able to take out some of the parking and that we were going to reduce that number. There would also be shared parking. We saw the trend was predicted to go to where families would go back to a single car because it was easy enough to send the car at home to go pick up somebody else and then bring them home. And things changed. It just did not go on that predicted trajectory. COVID had a lot to do with that. All of a sudden, we started relying more heavily on Uber and Uber Eats, other delivery sources shipped. Those types of things have, where you've got third party delivery has changed the way that we're looking at parking, but not the same way that we thought. So the requirements for parking have not gone down. They haven't gone down from the retailers. They have not gone down from the jurisdictions. They're staying the same, or in some cases, those have actually gone up a little bit, but not drastically. But those have definitely not reduced. And sometimes that's a fight because that the requirements are a little heavy. But now we have to plan areas for to go parking. I was working on the design of a plaza area, and it's going to have a lot of restaurants in it. And so we started looking at valet area because that's another big convenience. And especially when you have multiple things at the same area and it's harder to park right in the neck of where you want to get out and walk to those restaurants. So valet parking is a big deal because also Uber is going to drop off and pick up in those areas. Lyft is going to, all those shared rides. And you have to have a separate area for all of the restaurant delivery. And
Yeah.
again, those are third party. This isn't Pizza Hut delivery and Domino's delivery anymore. This is the Uber Eats and the dozen others that are out there that provide those services. So now we're designing for those. Another thing that we started to see during COVID was ghost kitchens. We're already an idea. If you're not familiar with that term, a ghost kitchen is, say, for instance, and this is just, I'm not saying that Chili's does this, but say, for instance, you have a chain like Chili's or several restaurants in an area. Maybe it's a regional thing and there is a strong need for delivery and it's taking up too much space and too much energy of your staff for those restaurants. So a logical place would be to move into a ghost kitchen that doesn't have a storefront. You don't have walk-in traffic, but you're creating the same meals and the same packaging, but drivers could come up and pick up the meals and go out for delivery in a more centralized area instead of using the resources for out of the actual restaurants, because you slow down ticket times for people that are waiting to get meals.
Yeah.
So I thought for sure that was going to take off, that was going to be everywhere, and it didn't. People
Huh.
have figured out a way to make that work. So I think that the idea of the ghost kitchen will still be there. I think that there are some more intense urban areas with a lot more, a less space available to be able to grow a kitchen, to be able to pick that up. Those will still be the case. But I think in general terms, that's not going to be an expanding market in my opinion. So
Interesting.
there are a few things that have changed, but we get used to those things. Um, the Uber drivers, dropping us off, the delivery, the internet shopping.
Yeah, I was floored. I did a project just before COVID in Baltimore and downtown Baltimore. So I ended up going into a luxury apartment project because it's dangerous anywhere else.
Uh-huh.
And I was floored how many people order groceries. That was at the very peak. That was before COVID, like say, and
Mhm.
everybody didn't want to carry. So there was like 4 underground levels of parking and then 6 above levels of living.
Uh-huh.
And nobody wanted to buy the cart or have to lug all their groceries up to their apartment. So they always had somebody else deliver. It was like, really? I'm not used to that. So, but it was a pain. It was a pain to carry it all up there. But
It
yeah,
is.
yeah, it's all relative. Yeah. And each region you can get some new ideas and start
Uh-huh.
melding it in. But I need to ask you the big question here because we've been talking a while now. um, I asked this of all the guests towards the end. Is there a pivotal person or event that either brought you to where you are today or that's pushing you towards some goal right now?
Mm. The most pivotal person in my career is still Terry Sturm. Terry hired me in 1998 in Las Vegas, and she was Territory Incorporated, and there it was Terry and an assistant, and I was the third person in her company. I left 7 years later, there were 22 people, and we were the number 2 commercial developer in the valley. And I remember very clearly one of the first discussions I had with her in her office at that time. She said, I'll never pigeonhole you. You're going to learn a lot. You're going to learn the business from one end to the other. And I thought, gosh, what an opportunity. She meant it. Um, I was licensed within a few months after that. I had a Nevada license and did some leasing, worked on land sales, worked on tons and tons of due diligence for new developments and pre-development, a lot of construction management, tenant coordination, a lot of that, national tenants, mom and pop tenants, everything. lease administration. I worked on our property management side and started our own property management company because, hey, I keep managing all these other outside companies. Let's do our own. Why not? Um, and eventually had a small development that I was the point person for in Reno. And it was incredible. She literally had me touching all aspects of the entire development process. And what a gift, to have somebody say, I want this from you, I see this in you, and give that gift of need and allow me to be able to explore all of that and support and challenge all the way through, and to also work with some of the most incredible people in the business.
I bet.
People that are still friends, today, actually most of us still stay in touch, at least some out of that group. And so I thank Terry every day for the knowledge that I have. And I see a lot of her words, come out in discussion or decision. And so that was probably the most pivotal person in my career.
But
yeah.
Terrific. I'm so glad you shared that. Now you get to call and tell her you nominated her, or have me. You just have to tell me how to reach her. And then if
Uh-huh.
she comes on the show, she gets to have a special promo, we put on their pivotal person and all that, and promote it likewise nationally. And then if she comes on the show, she gets a lapel pin that says pivotal person too. So
Oh,
it's a nice little
that's
conversation.
fantastic. I love that. I love
Yeah.
that. What a special way to honor somebody. That's great.
So tell people how they can reach you.
Sure. The easiest way to reach me is phone call. I am a cell person, so it's 813-362-9691. And you can email me at ginger@simoenssolutions.com, SIMOENS solutions.com.
Super.
I have
Fantastic.
a website, but easiest to just reach.
Well, you've been busy. You're too busy doing your work. You've got a great reputation, obviously, that follows you to get involved in some of the things you're doing. So I think that you might not even need one. Who knows?
I've got a couple of really great people that help me out. So it's always a joint effort. It's never alone.
Good.
These
Well,
projects
fantastic.
aren't meant to be done alone.
But we'll put all that information in the show notes and share it with you so you can make sure that it's there. And you're going to get me some pictures that we're going to include, I believe, too. So people will be able to actually see some goodies. So that'll be great. Very good. Well, thank you again.